biggest fentanyl bust in California history. A major operation getting $20 million worth of illegal drugs off the streets. Now law enforcement says this shocking discovery is linked to an international drug trafficking cartel. We start with a historic fentanyl bust out of Southern California as the drug problem grips millions in our country. 1 million pills linked to Mexico's notorious Sinaloa cartel seized this week. NewsNation border correspondent Robert Sherman joins us live. So, Robert, do we know anything more about who is behind this record-breaking bust?
Well, we know that the understanding from law enforcement is that it is the Sinaloa cartel, meaning that it is international criminal organization. And you look at the size of this bust, $15 to $20 million worth of drugs. It is significant. You look at the whole drug trade as a whole. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, however, meaning what we saw in California is really just the tip of the iceberg.
It's the single largest haul of fentanyl the DEA has ever seized in the state of California. 1 million counterfeit pills worth between $15 and $20 million picked up in Inglewood, near Los Angeles. Law enforcement believes the drug traffickers involved are linked to the Sinaloa cartel, founded by the notorious drug lord El Chapo, who's currently serving a life sentence in a U.S. prison. But this is far from exclusively a California problem. The Texas Department of Public Safety says since March of last year, they've seized 1,630 pounds of the drug, equivalent to over 369 million lethal doses, enough to kill the entire U.S. population.
It's a very heavily profited drug. They get the precursors from China. They are then able to manufacture these tablets in which Americans believe that it's some type of depressant or stimulant, but little do they know what they're ingesting is a 100% dose of fentanyl.
Drug trafficking is one part of the equation. The other big one is human smuggling. This car chase happened in Del Rio last week. As Texas DPS runs the fleeing truck down and it stops, roughly a dozen migrants hop out and make a break for it. Most were eventually caught. Days earlier, a similar incident happened in Mission, Texas. Migrants typically pay tens of thousands of dollars to be smuggled across the border, then driven north. Experts say the cartels oftentimes take advantage of those most desperate.
They have this whole apparatus that are really preying on people, and I don't think that's what's truly understood.
And the important thing to note, Nicole, is law enforcement says all of these elements here on the border play together. You see a large group of migrants crossing one portion of the border 5 to 10 miles down the road. While law enforcement is busy taking care of those migrants, that's where the drugs go across. And then another portion of border, that's where the smuggling takes place. It is a completely synchronized system down on the border. Nicole?
All right, Robert Sherman live with that. Thank you. Let's talk more about drug smuggling and the difficult battle to stop it at the border. Let's bring law enforcement analyst and former San Diego police officer Mark Powell. Mr. Powell, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me tonight.
All right, so we heard about this latest bust. 1 million pills certainly seems like a lot, but what type of difference will that make in the grand scheme of things?
Well, it's going to make a difference because it's going to save lives. You have 1 million pills off the market. Those pills could have been ingested by teenagers, by college students at parties, unwittingly purchased by somebody who thinks they're actually getting a real Vicodin or a real Xanax. The problem, though, is even though we stop these shipments, think about that. You have 1 million pills. That means they were going to sell these pills. They weren't just going to flush them down the toilet. So we have this incredible appetite in the United States for medication. And fentanyl is actually a pain medication that they currently use for surgeries and to help treat cancer patients. It's easier to make than heroin because it's synthetic. It doesn't involve growing poppies and having to go through some type of a process. So what we really need to look at is why is there such a huge demand in the United States for these opioid or counterfeit pills? Actually, they're not really counterfeit pills. They're just fentanyl pills disguised as whatever they want to put them into, that you can put it into.
Yeah, disguised as other drugs there. So you're saying this will at least save lives. That is ultimately, of course, the goal. And we know that this massive bust in California, but as Robert mentioned, as you just mentioned, this is really a much bigger problem. This is not just a California problem. It's not just a Texas problem.
I'm down here in San Diego, we have a porous border. You can just essentially walk across the border through gaps in the fence by Arizona. There's certain ways to jump over. people jump over the fence all the time. They don't even report it. They end up in the hospital because they do these big drops. And the fentanyl pills are so small and so easily to carry. They're easy to carry. You could put a bunch in a backpack and just run across the border, and you've just smuggled a bunch of fentanyl pills. So even though the DEA is doing a bang-up job trying to get these drugs off the market, we really need to secure that border. We need to tighten it up. We need to make sure that people aren't able just to mosey on across it, just through a river, or just walk through a hole in the fence.
Yeah, and you mentioned the DEA there. Does the DEA have enough resources to tackle this issue? It's huge.
There's no way the DEA or local law enforcement or FBI or Customs and Border Protection have the resources to tackle this problem. There are too many people coming across the border. It's unregulated. It's essentially open. There are caravans coming through. You would have to hire thousands and thousands of more agents to patrol the border, and you'd have to secure the border a little bit better through fencing and other types of technology, maybe sensors. But right now, it's a real tough battle for these guys. Hats off to them for the job that they're doing currently.
Oh, yeah, it's certainly not a problem easily solved. All right, Mark Powell, thank you.
Thank you for having me.